I'm Bill McGinnis, District Masonic Relations Officer for District 16 of the Grand Lodge of Texas. Today, December 1st, 1993, we're in Waco at Grand Lodge for the 158th Annual Communication of Grand Lodge. We're also here today to interview the most worshipful Grand Master for 1988, Grahm Childress. Well, I don't want to use up any more tape than that. Grand Master for 1988, Grahm Childress. Welcome. And is Grahm all right?
It's fine.
All right,
yes, sir.
That's fine. Grahm, in your year, when you started out your year, what was your theme and your goals? What did you have in mind when you took the gavel?
The Grand Master's coin that year had church, family, and masonry, and I think that each is an important aspect of every Mason's life. And when all three of those aspects are brought together in a man's life, it improves his relationship to everyone that he's involved with. And those three things of church, family, and masonry, each enhances the other, each embellishes the other, and that is what we tried to emphasize throughout the year. I've always thought that church is certainly important in a man's life. After petitioning the lodge, I realized that masonry certainly has an impact on my life, and it's appreciated what masonry has done for me in the associations that I've made through masonry. And in the year since I've been a Mason, when you consider I go across the state and I usually find someone that I know just happen upon them that I wouldn't have known anything about them, who they were, had it not been for masonry. And that's when friendships can be made that are that close and that far-reaching. There has to be something that's greater about masonry than just the taking of the obligation and knowing the statutes and laws. It's an affair of the heart.
Church, family, and masonry. In 1988, you were bound to have had some distance about all the anti-Masonic troubles that we've had in recent years. Was that a factor during your year? How did you look at that?
To a limited extent. At a lodge dedication in East Texas, a zealous evangelist came into the banquet and disrupted us and tried to tell us how misguided we were and that our efforts were of the devil and that we should mend our ways. And the situation was handled in a very dignified manner. He was asked to leave, but that made an impression on me that not everything is going to be rosy on the Masonic trail. There are detractors of Masonry. But with any organization, you're going to find those that are misinformed, that don't know whence they come. And so I do understand that, or can see that there were some underlying aspects that anti-Masonry. And at that time, our attitude toward it was just leave them alone, don't make waves. And since then, I have realized that we've got to define our position. We've got to say what we're for and be more visible, that just being quiet and letting them shout at us is not the answer for the anti-Masonic movement. But I don't think that then, or since that time, or even now, that element is going to have any great effect on our fraternity. It has not really swayed anyone or any great numbers to demit from the fraternity, and those of us who understand or think that we understand about Masonry have become firmer in our beliefs.
The word family was also on that coin. What about family and how it relates to Masonry in these days and maybe some changes we're going through? What do you think about all that? During your
having been raised in a traditional family and seeing the breakup of the family in this day and time, I can appreciate what family is. I think that people that are raised now, our children, so many of them are raised in one-parent households this day and time, and they miss so much. And the people that are struggling to raise children in one-parent families, I certainly sympathize with them and would lend any help that I would be capable of just to help the situation. I can really realize the value of the traditional family, the mother, the father, and the son, and the mother in the home. And society's changed since then. And maybe since so much of Masonry is based on tradition and sentiment, that's the reason that my aspect of appreciating what family is worked into my Masonic year, my Masonic Grand Lodge year.
During your year in the Grand East, what stands out in your mind as something that you were very proud of, or perhaps most proud of? Some of the things that you recall as things that you felt very.
In 1988, we started the Lamar Award for an outstanding high school student. We tried to make it flexible as without any stringent qualifications. Just let a lodge committee go and select a boy or a girl. I think at that time we said a senior, and since then it's been even more liberal that they don't have to be a senior, that stood on the principles of what Masonry holds high, of morality and scholarship and appreciation of the teachers, the love of education, and those students to be singled out and recognized with an award. And we had a very beautiful, I thought, medal cast that they could wear on a ribbon around their neck, and that has been continued since then. And many of the students that have received that Lamar Award I've talked to later on, and it certainly was appreciated by them. Also, as far as the coins go, I had a silver coin cast for each lodge, and sent it to the lodge to be presented to the first entered apprentice that had the degree conferred on him after I was installed in December of 1987. And I've had some Master Masons that have been active in their lodges come up to me since then and show me that coin that was presented as an entered apprentice. And that's gratifying to know that, again, that some small impression might have been made.
What about some of the other accomplishments maybe that year? You feel like maybe not the greatest moment, but some good old-fashioned nut and bolts things.
Some satisfactions that we would think about. There were 3 lodges across the state that I leveled the cornerstone and then returned later during the year to dedicate the lodge. And there's certainly a feeling of closeness to those lodges where you see what they did, from the foundation of building a new building, leveling the cornerstone, and then they finished the building, and we dedicated it all in the term of one Grand Master. And so from aspects such as that, you realize that they're not only working with Masonry in their lives, but they're working with Masonry in their physical buildings, and Masons are interested in putting their best foot forward with their buildings. I know when the deputies went around for their second visit, one of the suggestions I made, of course the second visit would be made sometime after the 4th of July, that if the lodge didn't have a flagpole, for them to try to install a flagpole if they had a yard, if they didn't have a yard, if they were in a storefront, to install a flagpole beside their door, and to fly that flag on their meeting days. And, of course, those of them that did take that suggestion, it's gratifying to see it. We dedicated several flagpoles across the state. And then I know a few lodges that fly their flag every day, and from that suggestion in the summer of '88.
What about disappointments, frustrating things? Bound to have had some things
course,
that just, you know, didn't fly.
Nothing's going to be all roses. I had a suggestion during Thanksgiving week that every lodge visit a nursing home, and especially if there were Masons in the nursing home, to let them know that they were remembered. And my idea was, since our membership is getting older, that not many of our members have students or children that are students in the public schools. And so to try to change the focus from public school week, or maybe not change the focus, that's a bad term, to have an added emphasis toward our senior members to visit a nursing home. And we got the ground officers together and had a meal at the Home for Aged Masons on Thanksgiving. And the response from that effort was practically zero. I don't know, maybe later on somebody will have the idea and promote it in a little different way. I don't think it's a good time of year around Thanksgiving when I look at it from hindsight. Hunting season's on then. People are getting ready for Grand Lodge then, and the holiday season is upon us. Maybe in a more slack time in the summer might be a time for a Senior Citizens Week.
Now, any Grand Master has a cast of thousands that helps him out, and you probably needed a little more help than some, because you're out there in West
because
Texas.
Of the distances involved.
How far are you from your home lodge anyway?
Well,
before we ask who all helped.
When I became master of Sanderson Lodge, I said there's bound to be something about Sanderson Lodge that's unique. Excuse me. And so I finally found one thing. Sanderson Lodge is further from another lodge than any other lodge in the state. The closest lodge is Fort Stockton Lodge, some 66 miles away. And so to visit back and forth, it requires effort. I know one night we attended a meeting in Odessa. There were several people from the Dallas-Fort Worth area there that night. And as Ray Robinson and I were driving home, we were still a long ways from Sanderson. And we looked at our watches and we said, well, the people that have flown back to Dallas and Fort Worth tonight are already home, and we still have an hour to go. So distance was certainly a thing that was to be considered. I put over 100,000 miles on the van. I bought a van in August of '87 before we started our deputy training program, and drove it through the Grand Lodge here, and had over 100,000 miles on it. I didn't attend as many, or in fact I didn't attend any out-of-state Grand Lodges. I just felt like that I owed my time to the Masons of Texas. That I would have enjoyed attending the neighboring Grand Lodges, but I just devoted my time to Texas. As far as out-of-state trips, I think I made 7, like York Rice Sovereign College in Seattle, and Imperial Shrine in New Orleans, the Southwestern Grand Lodge officers in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and 3 other out-of-state meetings. But I primarily spent my time in Texas, and still chalked up over 100,000 miles.
Well, we'll talk about your favorite helper, Marion, in just a minute. But who else kind of helped you along the way? And I know you can't name everybody, of course, but
if I were to go to naming names, the list would be incomplete. There are so many. Of course, I guess in every large metropolitan area, you have those who have certainly done a lot of legwork for you. The district deputies, they were a group that I'll always hold dear to my heart at every Grand Lodge session since then. I see the district deputies that served in 1988. I call them right worshipful, and I tell them that they'll always be right worshipful to me. And so it would really be hard to name names. I could go on for a long time on the people that made that year what it was. But a lot of the credit goes to the district deputy Grand Masters. It's a vital link between the Grand Master and the constituent lodges. You see movements every once in a while to make regions, and then the regions broken up into districts, and I'm against that because I think the vital link and the friendships that are made between the Grand Master and his deputies are something that are a real treasure.
Now, what about your favorite helper, Mary? Talk about her a little bit. Tell us how she felt about your going up the Grand Line and the year in the Grand East, and how that all fared.
Marion was a strong supporter, and I don't think any Grand Master could go through the line without having the support of his wife. There's a lot that's expected of a Grand Master's wife. Just to know that she travels with him is something that the membership looks to and expects and deserves. Again, when we go back to our theme of church, family, and masonry, if the Grand Master's wife thinks enough of the fraternity to neglect her household to the extent that it's necessary to travel with him, well, again, that is an example of her support for the Grand Master and for the program.
Now, I want to throw you a curve in a minute, but I can't help ask about your tie class. Can you tell me about your tie class a little bit?
Thank you. For the it's strictly a Western theme, Miller Robinson, he's a past master of Bayard Lodge, and his wife and my father were first cousins, and I wanted a Western theme, and Miller's boy lives in Sanderson, and we got to talking about this, and Ray said, well, Dad can do that. It'll be a good project for him. And so he made a tie clasp for the Grand Lodge officers and the past Grand Masters, and the same design for as a lapel pin for the district deputy Grand Masters. And then just before Grand Lodge, he and Ray gave me one with the 3 squares and compasses on it, the interdependence, the fellow craft, and the master mason, and I've worn it every year at Grand Lodge since then. It's made out of baling wire and horseshoe nails, and I've had people say that they would put their lapel pin or their tie tack in their pocket and then reach in and poke their hand with one of those horseshoe nails, and they're well reminded of just what they'd put in their pocket, but they were each one individually handmade and presented to the recipient, and Miller Robinson making that jewelry for me is certainly appreciated, and he served in 1988 as Grand Tyler of the Grand Lodge.
Looking back on 1988 and thinking of that year and keeping that year in mind to answer this question, and if they suddenly passed a resolution across the hall from us here and said it was possible for a Grand Master to turn around and go back through again, would you do it?
I think I would. I've heard so many people in positions of leadership, not so much in the Grand Lodge, but just more or less count the days. Well, I've just got so many days left, or I'm halfway through, and all that. I didn't really do that. I enjoyed every day of it. As we mentioned, there were disappointments. There were things that I wish that I hadn't done, and things that I needed to have done that weren't done. But as far as saying, well, this is it, I'm so glad it's over, I was really sorry when the year was over. I enjoyed it that much.
Looking at the Grand Lodge of Texas itself and Texas Masonry in general in the 90s now, where do you think it is right now, and where do you see the Grand Lodge and Texas Masonry going? If you had a crystal ball, what do you think?
I believe that our membership will probably continue to decline and then level off with a hardcore of very dedicated Masons. These prophets of doom say that the Masonic Lodge has just a number of years left before it will no longer be in existence. I don't see that, because Masonry has so much to offer to the men that receive the degrees, and I think that there will always be those who will receive the degrees and appreciate what Masonry can do for them. I don't believe that we will ever get back to the numbers that we had in the early 60s of 240 or 245,000 members, and our numbers will probably decline from what they are now. But I think that with the decline in membership, that the membership will become more tenacious and become more dedicated to what Masonry stands for, and will continue to carry the program out that we have.
A leaner, meaner machine is what you're talking about?
That's a good way to put it. Of course, there are financial obligations that Masonry has. That will be an added financial burden to the smaller membership, but I think that we can rise to the occasion. I've always felt that the constituent lodge, the subordinate lodge, should be left to run their own affairs as long as they are within the framework and the guidelines of our laws and Constitution, and have felt that it's not Grand Lodge business to poke their nose into every aspect of the individual lodge's workings. But if a lodge were to get off on a tangent, and be completely out of line and be illegal or incorrect, well, that's where Grand Lodge is to offer guidance and correction. So when we talk about this leaner, meaner machine, the reduction might be on the Grand Lodge level rather than on the subordinate lodge level. But the strength of Masonry is out in the subordinate lodge.
Okay. In closing, I'll ask you, like I have some of the other Grand Masters, this question. Let's go out west to Sanderson on a lodge night, and a newly raised Master Mason just through with the degree and shaking hands. Walk over to him. What would you say to that newly raised Master Mason? What would you tell him about his Masonic road ahead of him? I would tell him that the strength of Masonry is in the people that he's associated with. In his petition, he has declared that he supports what Masonry stands for, the brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God, and the divine authenticity of the Holy Scriptures, and the immortality of the soul. So those are givens. We know that aspect is implanted in his mind. But he doesn't know what kind of men he's going to be associated with necessarily. And that is what needs to be emphasized. So often we hear that the newly raised Mason or the newly affiliated Mason from another lodge is neglected and not given the treatment that he should have. I think that it's a fine line if you raise a Master Mason and then load too much work on him. He's going to be discouraged because he sees that something's expected of him that he doesn't know a whole lot about. But at the same time, if some of the brethren will take him under their wing and instruct him and let him know that he's appreciated, that they're glad that he's a member of the lodge, and as
things come up that he can do and increase his workload along, and then when he's ready to have an appointment as an officer, certainly give it to him and encourage him to learn the work, encourage him to be active in his lodge, but at the same time let him know that just because it's not possible for him to be as active in the lodge as some of the retired people that he sees that are there every time the lodge door opens, that doesn't make him any less of a Mason. When we give our 50-year pins out, I know on several occasions I would have a 50-year pin and call the recipient up, and he said, "Oh," said, "I don't really deserve that. I haven't been active in the lodge in 30 years. Well, my reply to that is he has paid dues for 50 years, and that is certainly an aspect that is to be commended. He might not have been at lodge meetings every time the door opens, but he has appreciated the fraternity enough to keep his dues paid up. He has lived by the obligations that he took 50 years ago, and he certainly deserves the recognition that that 50-year pin portrays to him." I'd like to tell you that I appreciate this opportunity to be here with you. You sit down kind of, what do you say, cold turkey, wondering what questions will be propounded to you, and it not only it has given me an opportunity to reflect about 1988, and there are a lot of fond memories that I'll have all my life. We look forward to coming back to Grand Lodge and visiting with, like I say, those that were appointed deputy that year, and the Grand Lodge officers that went through the same time before and after you. And those are all happy reflections, and will always be a treasure for me.
Grand Master Childress, thank you. We enjoyed it.
It's been a pleasure for me.
Biography on Grand Master Childress is taken from the Proceedings of the Grand Lodge of Texas for 1988. On December 5, 1987, Grahm H. Childress became the 5th Mason from west of the Pecos and the 115th individual to be installed as Grand Master of the Masonic Grand Lodge of Texas. Our Grand Master, the only son of Hugh and Rachel Childress, was born in San Angelo, Texas on February 17, 1936.